Hello, everyone, and good morning or good evening to you, wherever you might be. Today's live is going to be all about how to share your opinion more effectively for the IELTS speaking test. I'm so glad you joined today. Do you ever feel nervous or worried when you take the IELTS speaking test? Do you lose your words or forget what's in your mind before you start to speak? Many students have this issue, and in fact, when you go in front of the IELTS examiner, you will probably struggle with some different feelings. That's why it's very important to prepare yourself and know what you're going to do with your speaking before you take the test. Hi, I'm Jerry with Global Connection ESL, and I'm so glad you joined today. I run this YouTube channel for students who are interested in improving their IELTS band score, and I'm so thankful that you've joined today. There are many other videos on this channel that I hope can help you boost your score higher and build your skills even more. One more thing I'd like to share with you is that I also have one other YouTube channel called Learn English with Mr. Jerry. I hope you'll check that out too. It has a lot more variety for learning English, and it's a younger channel but has a lot of interesting things. I hope you'll check that out too. So let's go ahead and jump into today's conversation about how to improve your speaking for the IELTS speaking test. Just a quick review. I talked about yesterday that it's so important to know that you're going to share your opinion when you're talking to the IELTS examiner. And particularly, I'm talking about the third part for the IELTS speaking test. As you know, there are three parts to the IELTS speaking test. The first one, you have, 4 or 5 minutes where the examiner will ask you some questions to get to know you and to get some basic background about you and your future hopes. Also, this is the easiest part of the speaking test. The second part of the IELTS speaking test is where you receive an actual card that has a question on it. And that question is a question that you have a chance to prepare for. You are given 1 minute, I believe, to prepare for speaking, and then when the timer is up, the examiner will ask you to respond to the question, and you get 1 to 2 minutes to respond to that question. And so that leads us to part 3 for the IELTS speaking test. Part 3 is the most difficult part because this is where the IELTS examiner is going to ask you deeper questions about your opinion and about the issues that were brought up many times from that card. So it could be a continuation of the topic on that card. There are times where the examiner can take the conversation in a little more different direction, but this part 3 of the IELTS speaking test will go much deeper. So what I said to you yesterday is that you must know that you need to have an opinion about things. And I shared some opening lines for you as you start to talk about your opinion. Many students just say, "in my opinion," and that's the only phrase they use. But you should use a variety of phrases, such as "in my view," or "generally speaking," or "I have some mixed feelings about that, but," and you continue on. There were several that I shared with you yesterday, and I hope you'll go back and view that video as well. Ways to say your opinion, to introduce your opinion with different phrases. So many students will say, "to be honest, I think," and remember, with the IELTS speaking test, you don't have to be honest. The examiner is checking your English skills. They are not checking whether your opinion is right or wrong or good or bad. So it's more important that you speak and develop your answers with good English proficiency. So once you have started to introduce your opinion to a question, then you want to go from the big idea to something that's a little clearer and a little more specific. And then you want to share some details or examples or specific points. So let's take an example of how you might do that. So let's say, for example, if you were given a question by an IELTS examiner that was this question: what benefits do you think are important in a good job? Think about that question just for a second yourself and think what your opinion might be. What benefits do you think are important in a good job? Maybe you can make a couple notes in the chat and tell me what you think those benefits are to having a good job. I'd also like to talk about a sample answer. And so when I say that you start by introducing your opinion, I'm going to use an example phrase, and I'm going to start with a big idea. I'm going to get a little clearer with a description or explanation of what I just said, and then I'm going to give some examples. So listen to this response to the question: what benefits do you think are important in a good job? Generally speaking, I'd say the benefits to having a good job are a good salary, health care, and work-life balance. That's my big ideas. I pulled out the big concepts, but I want to take them into a little more specific for the examiner to show that I can explain what I've just said. So I might use the phrase something like this to begin my more specific explanation. What I mean is, or in other words, or to be more specific, those are some example phrases that I can use to go from the bigger picture down to a little more specific case. So let me give you an example. So what I mean is, every person who takes a job should be able to make enough money to support themselves and their family. I think that every person wants to be able to have enough confidence that they are providing for their family. So a good salary is one way to do that. In other words, a good salary gives people confidence to support their family well. I also mentioned healthcare. I mentioned healthcare because I believe that a company has a relationship with an employee to help them even when they are sick. And so this government regulation should be stable and strong to help people so that they can get back to normal when they struggle with being sick. And I also mentioned work-life balance. What do I mean by work-life balance? What I mean is that a company should get good results from you when you're working for them, but they also should give you the time that you need to rest outside of the job. So, in other words, I would say work-life balance goes well with a 40-hour work week. When people have to work even more than 40 hours, they probably aren't getting enough rest. So do you see? I introduced the big idea. I brought it to a little more specific explanation. And now I want to give a couple examples. So you can start your example with these phrases. For example, or for instance, or let me tell you a short story. These are ways to introduce your examples. So I might say something like, for example, I have a friend who lives in San Francisco. The cost of rent for an apartment in San Francisco is very expensive. And so my friend is driving for 1 hour and a half every day to live far away from the city in order to pay for a cheaper rent for their apartment. This is because the job that they are working in doesn't have a good salary. I believe that jobs should give you a good salary so that you can at least live somewhat close to your company. So that's an example. So I went from the big idea of the benefits of a good job. I got more specific and told about what I meant, and then I gave an example. And if you can do this during the IELTS speaking test, it will make for a better answer to the question. Now, there are a few points that I'd like to encourage you to follow through with on the IELTS speaking test. First of all, remember that the IELTS examiner is just another person who's doing a job and is checking your English proficiency. They don't love you, they don't hate you. They're just checking your English language. So it's okay if you tell the truth. It's okay if you tell something that's different than your opinion. You want to express your ideas clearly. And because they are a normal person, why don't you think about them as a friend or somebody in your family, somebody that you can relax with when you're talking? Because when you relax, you can share your ideas more clearly. It's also a good idea to do a lot of listening, reading, writing, and speaking in English before the test so that your mind is ready and prepared to be using English only for the test. And because I said the IELTS examiner is just a normal person, remember to smile and talk naturally with that examiner. Sometimes students start to take the IELTS speaking test and they get so nervous they talk really fast, and that's not a good idea. And sometimes they talk way too slow. So don't talk too fast and don't talk too slow. Talk at your normal speed. You will be marked on the IELTS speaking test for grammar, for fluency, for your vocabulary, and for your pronunciation. And chances are your pronunciation is not perfect, but the important point is that you speak at a speed where you are understood. It's okay if you don't have perfect pronunciation, but you do need to be understood by the IELTS examiner. And if you speak too quickly, sometimes the pronunciation mistakes make it more difficult to understand. So speak at a normal speed, not too fast and not too slow. And don't worry about the time. Develop your answers and share as much as you can, because the IELTS examiner is the one checking the time. And when the time is up, they will tell you to stop. And that's okay. It doesn't mean your answer is good or bad. It just means they need to follow a time schedule because there are other students waiting and they have a job to do. So if the time ends and the examiner tells you to stop, that's okay. It doesn't mean that it's good or bad for your score. It just means that the time is up. So I hope this explanation of going from a big idea to a more narrow explanation, a description of what you mean with some examples makes sense and will help you on the next IELTS speaking test that you take. When are you taking the next IELTS speaking test? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know and encourage you so that you can have a great band score. Do you have other questions about IELTS or about learning English in general? I'd be more than happy to hear about that. So do leave your questions and your comments in the chat or in the comments to the video below. If you want to know more about the information that I shared in this video, you can look at the description box under the video where I will put more details about what I have shared today. So thanks so much for watching. Thank you for joining today's live. And if you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, would you consider subscribing? I'd love to have you as a part of this team of people learning to improve their IELTS score and getting stronger and stronger with their English skills. So thanks so much for joining today. I look forward to the next time we can share our live together. Take care.